Good morning. Welcome to our online worship service of Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. We will put the link in the chat. Whomever you are and wherever you have come from for this hour, we here are one gathered congregation and all are welcome. My name is Ed Woods and I have been a member here since 1985. And I am currently chair of the Building and Grounds Committee. Our worship leader this morning is our minister, Reverend Jessica Starr Rockers. I'd like to welcome any visitors. Please introduce yourselves in our chat box. We welcome more interaction with all during our after-service Zoom coffee hour. The link for our coffee hour will go in the chat next. You will need to use the password coffee, that's coffee with a capital C, to be admitted to the coffee hour. Today there is also an adult education group after the service at 11:45. They will be discussing the book An Indigenous People's History of the United States. All are welcome, and the link will be posted in the chat. You will need the password ARE, all in capital letters. That's ARE in capital letters. The announcements are available on our webpage, www.kuuf.org, or our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. We would like to start today by acknowledging that the land on which we all live is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish, the Sklallam, and the Skokomish people. They have lived in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington Central Sailor Sea for thousands of years. These tribes still live here and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Now please enjoy Brian Kenny, Alina Hemingway, and Mike Menifee doing our call to worship, number 1009, Meditation on Breathing.
When I breathe
Now Hazel and
I
Ani
offer you peace.
Pendergast will do the chalice lighting on an iMovie.
I offer you friendship. I offer you love. I see your beauty. I hear your needs. I feel your feelings. My wisdom comes from within. I honor that source in you. Let us work together.
Our opening hymn, number 298, Wake Now My Senses, was written by Thomas S.J. Mickelson, a Unitarian Universalist minister. The hymn was written for an ordination service in the First Parish Church of Arlington, Massachusetts. Please join in singing our opening hymn, Wake Now My Senses. The lyrics will appear on your screen.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Please join me in the spoken affirmation. The words will appear on your screen. We gather as a caring community seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and affirm the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now it is time for our morning offering. If you would like to donate electronically, please click on the paypal.me link in the chat. You may then email admin@kuuf.org to let us know if your donation is for 1, the KUUF General Fund, 2, the Minister's Discretionary Fund to help our members in need, or 3, our monthly charitable giving recipient for the month of October, which is the South Kitsap Helpline. You may also send a check to the address on the screen. Please write in the memo line to which of the funds your offering should go. If this is your first time at KUUF, you are our guest, so there is no need to contribute. Let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us.
Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual works of love.
Okay, good morning. Well, this is time for our children's story, so I'd like to invite all of the young and the young at heart to come and sit closer to the screen. So today I'm going to tell you a story about a time when a group of Unitarian Universalists had to make a difficult decision together and needed to listen to each other. And this story is also about one of our UU ancestors, James Luther Adams. He was known as JLA. You know how we do that sometimes with people's names. So perhaps you have heard this before, but Unitarian Universalism is a living faith. This means we think all people should be free to believe their own truth, the truth of their life experiences, rather than believing what they are told to believe. A belief is also known as a creed. So this is what we mean when we say ours is a creedless religion. And being a living faith means that any one of us can change what we believe if we experience a deeper truth that contradicts our previous belief. But in order to change, we have to be open to new thoughts, new ideas, and new experiences. We have to be open to hearing the experiences of the people with whom we are in community. So there is a saying that people were created with 2 ears and 1 mouth because we should listen twice as much as we speak. Well, when we come together in community, we have the opportunity to listen to each other and gain a perspective greater than what we would have alone. So it seems like when we keep our ears open, we can hear one another. But when we are in a sacred, beloved community, we listen not only with our ears, but with our hearts. And a listening heart is like having a superpower. So let me tell you this story about a listening heart. In 1948, most congregations and houses of worship in the United States were segregated, which means they were separated by the color of their members' skin. Some were segregated by law, and others because that was the way it had always been done. It was the custom. Well, the First Unitarian Society of Chicago was one of these congregations. Although their church was located in a neighborhood with many Black Americans, only whites could join. And this was written in the bylaws, which were the rules of the church. Well, the day came that many members began to believe that they needed to take action against racism if they really wanted to live their values and principles. So the minister, the Reverend Leslie Pennington, was ready for this day and ready to take action. And so was James Luther Adams. JLA, James Luther Adams, was a famous liberal theologian and social ethicist, a person who studies religion, beliefs, and values. And Dr. Adams, JLA, taught at the Meadville Lombard Theological School, where I went to school, right across the street from the First Unitarian Society of Chicago. And so he was a member of the congregation's board of directors. That means he was a leader in the congregation. And along with some others, Reverend Pennington and James Luther Adams proposed a change in the church's bylaws, in their rules, to desegregate the church and welcome people whatever the color of their skin. They wanted to include people, not exclude, and they saw this as a way of putting love into action. When the congregation's board of directors considered the desegregation proposal, most of them supported it. However, one member of the board objected strongly. "Your new program is making desegregation into a creed," he said. "You are asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating or inviting and even recruiting people of color to attend church here is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this?" Well, desegregation was a very controversial topic. In 1948, anything about skin color and racism was controversial. Some people, even some who supported Black Americans in demanding their civil liberties, believed in a separate but equal policy, which kept people apart based on their skin color. So debate ensued at the First Unitarian Society of Chicago. Both sides felt in their hearts that their belief was right. And perhaps they were so busy trying to be heard that they forgot to listen, and so they kept on talking. The debate went on in the board of directors meeting until the early hours of the morning. Everyone was exhausted and frustrated. Finally, James Luther Adams remembered that we should be listening twice as much as talking, and he asked the person who had voiced the strongest objection, "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" Suddenly, everyone was listening. Everyone wanted to hear the answer to this crucial question. The board member who opposed opening the church to people of color finally replied, "Okay, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them." And with that, the vote was taken, and the First Unitarian Society of Chicago successfully desegregated. And you know what? What I think about when I hear this story, there are things that you believe, and there are things that I believe. And when we listen to one another with ears and hearts, we can build the beloved community, a community where each one of us can let our light shine. And in fact, listening with the heart is actually when you listen beyond what a person is saying, beyond the words that they are saying, and you listen to hear and to witness to the shining of their light. That's listening with the heart. So now let's sing our song that we sing about letting our lights shine. And it's about letting our lights shine and witnessing to the shining of everyone else's light as well. Whoa. Okay. You guys ready? We've got some different lyrics here today, but keep up. You can do it. Okay. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Listening with my heart, listening with my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Listening with my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Listening with my heart, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Very nice. You were hiding pretty well there today, William, behind Leon. Thank you for singing. Thank you, everyone, for singing. I can just imagine you letting your lights shine. Fills my heart. So now is the time for our joys and our sorrows. Though we are physically distanced from one another, our hearts and our spirits and our lights remain connected. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. If you have a personal joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to write it in the chat this morning, and I will read it out loud. Liz says, we are joyful that Brian's mom, Carol, is now at Northwoods Lodge and will be home soon. We share that joy with you, Liz and Brian. Sending lots of love and blessings to Carol. Happy birthday on Tuesday to Sterling Fisher. Sterling is 95 years young.
Wow.
Thank you for reminding of that of us of that, Celine. And happy birthday, Sterling. We're so happy to be celebrating this birthday with you. 95 years young. OE, joyful that we moved into our new apartment. Blessings on your move. Ellen and Alan mourn the loss of our favorite sister-in-law. We're holding that loss with you. Marcy Sorrow had to say a final goodbye to my cat and quarantine mate on Thursday. Marcy, we remember seeing your sweet cat in our animal blessing service. Sending lots of love to you today. Jennifer says, still grieving the loss of our dear friend Luke Mayhew, who died unexpectedly last week. We hold his fiance, who is expecting their child, in our heart. We're holding that in our heart too with you, Jennifer, and with his family. Eden, joy that yesterday my granddaughter Eden turned 16 and got her driver's license. What a joy. Eden, congratulations. Ginny, in joyful remembrance of Elizabeth and Roger Bondi, we spread Elizabeth's ashes this AM over her garden with the Olympics in full splendor. How wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. What a blessing. Joy from TJ that Lucy and I were finally able to attend church today. We're so glad you're here and feeling better. And for all of the wonderful people in our lives who checked in on us while we were sick and who are always there in general as well. We're so glad that you are with us, TJ and Lucy, that you're feeling better. Ellie, joyful that Tanisha and her children visited Hobie and me yesterday and picked apples from our tree. How fun. What a wonderful fall thing to do. Bonner says, joy for continued Vespers service, which has been feeding my heart, mind, and soul each Wednesday night at 7:30. Another joy for Zoom making it possible for my mother and sister to attend this past Wednesday's Vespers. So glad. Lisa asking for prayers for my brother Joe Johnson, who is in Harrison, St. Michael's, undergoing treatment for pulmonary emboli and heart issues. He is a man with so much heart, and I am so grateful for him. Lisa and Mac, we're sending our prayers out to Joe, healing prayers, and to your whole family. Sue and Jim, this past week, Jim and I lost our little doggy friend, Tucker. We miss him very much, but feel he is free to run in the woods with the deer and squirrels and come home whenever he wants to. Well, I remember meeting Tucker and what a wonderful presence he is and has been in your lives, and we're just holding all of you. Blessings on Tucker's spirit. Robin says, joy that my sister's severe vertigo of 2 years has been finally successfully treated. What a wonderful joy, Robin. And Fox says, joyful that my grandmother is opening her mind politically and hearing me when I speak on how the current climate affects me and those I love. We're sharing in that joy with you, Fox. So glad and grateful. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. May you who shared this morning, all of you, all of these wonderful joys and sorrows, may you feel the love of this community surrounding you and holding you close, you and all of your beloveds. And for all those whose joy or sorrow is too tender to share, our hearts are with you. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be.
Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose, help him or her to empty his heart. And if you remember that you are helping him or her to suffer less, and then even if he say things full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable to continue to listen with compassion. Because you know that listening like that, with compassion, you give him or her a chance to suffer less. If you want to help him or her to correct his perception, and then you wait for another time, but for this, the time being, you just listen with compassion and help him or her to suffer less. And 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing. The fear, the anger, and the despair is born on the ground of wrong perception. And we have wrong perceptions concerning ourselves and the other person. And that is the foundation for conflict and war and violence.
You've said that the only way we can begin to end war is due to communication between people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to say like this, dear friends, dear people, I know that you suffer a lot. I have not understood enough of your difficulties and suffering. It's not our intention to make you suffer more. It is the opposite. So please tell us about your suffering, your difficulties. I'm eager to learn, to understand. It has to start like that, loving speech. And if we are honest, if we are true, they will open their heart and tell us. And then we practice compassionate, deep listening. And during the process of deep listening, we can learn so much about our own perception and their perceptions. Mm-hmm. And that is the best way, the only way to remove terrorism.
Terrorism or even difficulties between yourself and yes. family members or friends.
Yes.
And the principle is the same no matter the conflict.
Yes.
Well, what do you say is the purpose of this church? As the story goes that we read earlier, UU theologian James Luther Adams asked this question of the Board of Trustees of his congregation, First Unitarian in Chicago, over 70 years ago, during a time of social change very like the one we are experiencing now. What do you say is the purpose of this church? It was the early hours of the morning when he asked that question. His board had been talking all night about desegregation. Can you imagine the commitment it takes to the side of any argument to sit in a board meeting and fight for your side through the whole night, maybe 10 or more hours? When I picture the conflict this board was experiencing, the struggle as they attempted to live out their UU values in what in 1948 felt like a challenging modern world, when I consider the passion and the purpose behind their beliefs, I see similarities to the conflicts we are experiencing now in our country and in our faith movement, between those who believe in supporting Black Lives Matter and those who don't, between those who believe we live in a white supremacist society and those who don't, between those who believe we are called to listen to the prophetic witness of Black leaders and leaders of color and those who would rather suppress those voices and fear them. What do you say is the purpose of this church? It is worth noting that as a congregation, for the last 8 months, the only time we have gathered in person in any significant number has been to protest, to rise up against fascism, and to support calls for justice, for the movement for Black lives, and for Stonechild Chiefstick and the Suquamish tribe. It is worth noting that in the midst of everything, showing up for love and justice in our community has been a primary focus of our congregational life this year. And so much of this is because we are listening. Listening to the scientists when they tell us we must practice social distancing to protect the most vulnerable in our congregation and our society. Listening to those in our community and our faith who have been marginalized and silenced for too long, and committing ourselves to collective liberation. Listening to the call of our own inner knowing, our own compassion and wisdom that says the purpose of this church is to get a hold of people, all people, and love them. Because we know that listening, really listening and loving, not only changes the person we are listening to, it changes all of us. James Luther Adams paused and asked his board member a loving question that spoke not head to head, but heart to heart, mindfully listening and inviting the other person into this mindfulness so they too could listen to their own call toward love and justice. And this moment of mindfulness changed everything. Mindful listening is a contemplative spiritual practice that goes back thousands of years. It is part of the fourth precept of Buddhism, mindful speech, mindful listening. In Buddhism, of Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva of compassionate listening. And this word in Buddhist circles is often used to refer to someone who knows the art of listening. Avalokiteshvara literally translates to one who listens to the pain of the world. In Tibetan Buddhism, the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara is the Dalai Lama. To be fully present to the pain of the world, this is the Bodhisattva Vow, and one that we could say is a Unitarian Universalist vow as well, if UUs had such things. I have said this many times lately, but it's worth repeating again and again, that part of our spiritual call as UUs is to witness to injustice, no matter how difficult or frightening or uncomfortable, and then to do something about it. We don't retreat from the pain of the world to protect ourselves. We are fully present and in service to the world. We gather in community. We listen mindfully to ourselves, to one another, to the wisdom of our elders and ancestors, to the prophetic voices of those on the margins, and then we work to bring compassion and love and justice to this moment, this life, right now. When I think about the story of James Luther Adams having the presence of mind, after hours and hours of argument, to pause and ask, what do you say is the purpose of this church? I am in awe at this display of mindfulness. I suppose JLA, as he was known, knew he was in the right. He knew this was a question of justice. He knew it was wrong to debate about people's humanity. He knew that having it in the bylaws of his congregation that only white people could join was not in line with our universalist values, that it was wrong, plain and simple. I'm sure at first he wanted to believe that all it was a lack of information. We've all had arguments like this. If only we could get the other person to see the facts, to hear the truth, they would see it from our perspective. They would understand, and this would bring them around to right thinking and right acting. But at some point in that long evening, James Luther Adams stopped trying to talk at and convince the other person of the facts, and instead he chose to listen. In the video we saw of Thich Nhat Hanh speaking with Oprah, Thich Nhat Hanh says that deep listening is the answer even to terrorism. Even to terrorism. I want to believe him, because he knows he has lived it. For 40 years, Thich Nhat Hanh was exiled from his home country, Vietnam, for speaking out against the Vietnam War. He says during the war, his fellow Buddhist monks and nuns worked so hard for peace and healing. They begged for peace, martyred themselves for peace, but their voices were lost in the sound of bombs. No one was listening. And yet they carried on. They organized demonstrations, helped war victims, established social services. When a village was bombed, they would start to rebuild it. When it was bombed again, they would start over. Despite the seeming hopelessness of their situation, and even though their own lives were at risk, the monks and the nuns never stopped listening to the suffering around them, and this compelled them into compassionate, loving action. What do you say is the purpose of this church? This question is so great because the answer isn't just for James Luther Adams. He's asking it so the person he is speaking with can hear and listen to themselves. He's inviting that person with whom he is in conflict to enter into a deeper relationship with their own self. Remember your humanity, he seems to be saying. Remember who you are. I call you back to yourself. Why do we think we are here if not for love and justice? When we are fighting change because we are afraid and angry, we have to ask ourselves, what are we fighting so hard to protect? James Luther Adams cut through the anger of that moment and allowed that person to transcend their fear, their anger, their small-mindedness and bigotry, and remember who they were called to be. As we get closer and closer to the end of this election cycle, there's only a handful of days left, and the noise around us grows louder and louder, the anger and the distraction and the lies. Mindfulness practices are more important than ever. The more we can ground ourselves and calm ourselves now, the better prepared we will be for the days and the weeks and the months ahead. Regardless of the outcome of this election, in the months ahead, we will need to be well practiced in calling ourselves and one another back into that space of remembering who we are called to be. And it begins simply with getting quiet, so that first we can listen to ourselves. Within each of us is an inner knowing, an inner wisdom, gifted to us by our ancestors, and by all that is sacred and holy. It knows why we hurt, it knows what we fear, and it understands that love is the only thing that sets us free from hurt and fear and suffering. Spending some time each day, even just a few minutes, in mindful silence, invites this wisdom to rise to our consciousness. It helps us maintain calm and peace, so we can be kind to our pets and our loved ones as the world around us rages. And it also allows us to be present, fully present to this moment. Listening is a gift of presence. And we give this gift to ourselves first. We listen to the beating of our own hearts without judgment. We breathe. You can all do that now. We breathe and connect with life itself, that which transcends all current circumstance, no matter how scary. And from this place of groundedness, we can listen deeply and be present to those who are suffering. We not only witness in solidarity, we are also able to take compassionate action. Our children's chalice lighting, which is Gandhi's prayer for peace, is a perfect example of the gift of listening presence that we can offer to those around us. I offer you peace. I offer you friendship. I offer you love. I see your beauty. I hear your needs. I feel your feelings. My wisdom comes from within. I honor that source in you. Let us work together. As UUs, we recognize that when one of us suffers, we all suffer, and therefore none of us are free until all of us are free. That is the UU vow. And in the face of hate and anger, in the face of those acting out in violence, it is important to remind ourselves, those of us who hold marginalized identities, we are not required to be abused in the name of peace. We don't have to sit for 10 hours and listen while someone debates our humanity. This is a job for those who are allies and accomplices, for those not on the margins. And for those who must protect themselves from this sort of harm, we can sit in a place of knowing our own worth, a place of love and dignity, curious about the fear that motivates those who oppress us, and how those in power exploit this fear to divide all of us from our own inner knowing and from one another in order to keep control. Because ultimately, we are all trying to get free from hate. And the noise exists for a reason. All of the anger and the distraction and the lies, they exist to keep us separate. The bombs so loud they drown out our voices, so that we can't listen or be present to one another. And this not only disconnects us from one another's humanity, but from our own as well. What do you say is the purpose of this church? Every person who is gathered here today, all of you out there who I can't see, but I trust you are there, each one of us may have a different answer to this question. The purpose of this fellowship is ultimately determined by all of us working together in community. But we will not know what our shared vision is until we listen. So I invite you in the days and weeks and months ahead to continue to listen and keep listening to one another, to yourselves, to the world around you in all of its pain and beauty, to those who suffer and to those who are afraid. Be fully present to this moment and listen. Listen for the wisdom of the ancestors, those who fought for civil rights, those who fought fascism, all of those whose work we are continuing. Keep listening. so that when the time comes, when we are asked by someone, "What is the purpose of this congregation?" we will hear them and know the answer. Called back to ourselves, called back into deeper relationship, deeper community, deeper compassion and love. Amen. Ashe. May it be so.
I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. My ears are wide open. My eyes are now open to see what I may be. I'm listening. I am listening. Spirit, speak to me. I'm listening. I am listening. In this moment of Spirit, speak through me. I can hear the voices of all my kind. I'm listening, singing. I am listening, tweeting and howling into the wind. My ears are wide open, and oh, the joy. My eyes are wide open, oh, the love to see what I for you and me. Oh, I'm listening in this moment of silence. I am listening. I hear Spirit speak through me.
I invite you now to set an intention and choose your word for the week ahead. You can choose a word or a phrase, and if you feel called to, you can put it in the chat, and I will read them aloud. Breathe. Redefine, discover, promote, work for our purpose. Curiosity. Listen and reflect. One day at a time. The bowl. The world is sound. We are pure energy. Patience. No change comes instantly. Balance. Find purpose. Trust in love. Patient listening with love. Center. Perseverance. Realign. Generosity. Move through fear with compassion for self and others. Self-care. Acceptance. Reset. Peace. Take each moment one at a time. Non-attachment. Empathy. Compassion. In the silence, we settle in to what is, the eternal now, nearer the breath, nearer than heartbeat. Be here now. Sit in silence. Well, thank you, everyone, for sharing your intentions. May our intentions stay with us this week in our hearts, settle into our beings, that we carry them with us. And now for our closing hymn, number 1001, Breaths.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestor's breath in the voice of the waters.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Please join us after this for coffee hour. The link and the password will appear on the screen and they will appear in the chat as well. And the password is coffee with a capital C. And the question for our small groups during coffee hour is, what is the purpose of this congregation? We also have our adult education class after the service today. They will be discussing the book Indigenous Peoples' History of the U.S. So if you If you attended the talk that I gave a couple months ago or so, whenever that was, and you're eager to chat a little bit more about the book, if you've been reading the book, I invite you to attend that. I think that's going to be a great conversation. And the link for that is going to appear in the chat as well. And lastly, just another quick plug for our annual auction. It is coming up fast. It's an online auction that begins with a fun Zoom party on November 7th. We still need donations, so check your candle, our newsletter, on how to donate. Message Tanisha at admin@kuuf.org. Save the date for the party, November 7th. And now let us extinguish our chalices. As we leave this space, may the bonds we feel remain. May the words of this day continue to guide us and steady us as we make our way. May the space we hold for each other keep us tethered to a place of calm, to that opening in our hearts that allows the grace of the world to continually flow in and speak. And may we continue to listen. Amen. Ashe. May it be so.
You don't blow it out till after service, guys.